Senator Bonoff.
Thank you, Madam President. I think after the last two recounts that we've had in Minnesota, that voters are concerned about voter integrity, and that there is a lot of talk in our communities about the importance of having proper identification. And so I have been at town hall meetings and been in community forums where my voters have expressed that as well. So I actually stand as somebody who's for having some sort of identification, and I think it is part of the future for Minnesota elections and something that I would support. Having said that, I go back to the process about this bill. Senator Sieben talked about the bipartisan elections group that worked at the University of Minnesota with Professor Larry Jacobs. It was the year before last, and I was part of that group as well. We met week after week after week for a long period of time and looked at many issues with regards to elections. We had a matrix of things that were listed as things that needed reform, and we began with things we agreed upon most, and we worked out from there. It was controversial, it was challenging. I found myself sometimes, agreeing with Tom Emmer more than some of my other colleagues, and that was surprising. But actually, I was joking about that, but actually it was a very fulfilling experience in that we saw that we could come to agreement, and it was that process that allowed us to then change our primary date, as well as Senator Sieben and Senator Rest and many others worked on enacting many other election reforms. One of the biggest concerns I have had this session is that we have not engaged in a bipartisan way at the beginning of working on very important and challenging, complex issues. The leads of the chairs of the committees have not engaged the leads and have not said, let us try from the beginning to put together a bill that reflects the bipartisan makeup of the legislature and, for that matter, the state. I have said many times there was no mandate. We have a Democratic governor and we have a Republican-led legislature. We actually have the opportunity to break new ground here in Minnesota by working together, finding where there is common agreement, and then hammering out where there are differences. So, for example, with this bill, one of the things I'm most concerned about are those who are not able to get this photo ID in a timely fashion. I've understood that in other states there's a process for an affidavit. The affidavit is something that allows somebody to vote on that day. In this bill, we have instead a provisional ability to vote. And then the burden is on the citizen to find a way to come back within 7 days. It is my belief that a system of an affidavit would be a much more inclusive process for those exceptions, and that in fact the fiscal note of tracking down those affidavits and making sure that that person is who they say they are would be much less expensive than devising this whole system whereby we have to pay for all these voter cards. If instead we had an exception system and then used our resources to make certain those who said they were someone without an ID could be verified. I think there are some common sense measures that could be done, and I understand that Senator Howe has a bill, which I haven't seen, that actually proposes an affidavit system. I think there are things that could be done. I want the people in my community to know that I hear their concerns, that I'm committed to addressing those concerns, that I'm actually hopeful that if this bill does get vetoed, that there will be an opportunity to work in a bipartisan way to solve some of the pitfalls and the challenges. It's not all right with me to sign or to vote green on a voter ID bill that the League of Women Voters is telling me that's a no. If the League of Women Voters has concerns, then I think we should hear their concerns and get them worked out. We have some time before the 2012 elections. Let's not just shut out those who we don't agree with. Let us use the legislative process. You know, I would have to commend Senator Gerlach. Senator Gerlach runs his committee in such a way that when those disagree, he gives them a charge, work it out, or don't come back here. There are many issues with this bill. I think I commend Senator Limmer for responding to what he hears as a growing public concern. Now, some may say that concern is invalid, and that's fine, but perception is reality, and I believe the public is concerned about voter integrity, and I don't blame them because we've had 2 tough recounts, and that leaves a concern in one's mind. This bill isn't there yet because it hasn't allowed itself to go through the process to work out the concerns of the many groups who have raised them. So I would urge Senator Limmer that if this doesn't work out, to approach this in another way, perhaps work with Senator Howe. I offer my assistance to be a part of this process and come to some agreement with regard to these activities. Now, having said that, I think our first priority is balancing the budget, and this could be done over the interim or next year. So thank you.